You know, most retirees, they won't say this out loud, but even when everything looks perfect on paper, there's this unsettling feeling you can't quite explain. Like you're supposed to feel relaxed, but instead, you're wondering what you're missing. You know, you did everything right. You worked for decades. You saved, you planned, you were responsible when it mattered the most. So, why does retirement still feel unsettling? Why does it feel like this quiet, low grade anxiety humming in the background, even though the math says you're fine? Why do you still wake up some mornings thinking, did I miss something? Did I overlook something? Is there something I should be doing that I'm not? You know, if you've ever felt that, folks, you're not alone. And more importantly, there's a reason for it. Today I'm going to show you why retirement still feels unsettling even when you did everything right. And why it's not a sign that you failed. Folks, it's actually a sign you're human. So let's start with the part nobody talks about. It's the invisible shift. You know, retirement isn't just a financial transition. It's an identity transition. You know, for 30, 40, sometimes 50 years, you lived inside a structure. You had a schedule. You had responsibilities. You had a role. You had a purpose that was externally defined. And then one day, it all stops. Not gently, not gradually, not with a warm handshake. It stops like someone flipped a switch. And here's the tension. Your life changed overnight, but your brain didn't. Your brain is still wired for the world you lived in for decades. It's still scanning for structure, for responsibility, for predictability, because that's what kept you safe. So even if your finances are solid, your brain is still trying to figure out what the new rules are. That mismatch creates unease, a subtle, persistent feeling of something's just off. You know, I was talking with a retired engineer not long ago. A guy had spreadsheets for everything. His retirement plan was airtight. He had more than enough saved. He had no debt. He had a pension. He had Social Security. And he had investments that were actually performing pretty well. On paper, he was the definition of set. But he told me something that stuck with me. He said, you know, for 40 years, I knew exactly what tomorrow was going to look like. Now I wake up, the whole day's blank. And somehow, that feeling is scarier than running out of money. He didn't miss work. He didn't miss meetings. He didn't miss the deadlines. He missed knowing who he was inside of a system. And that's when it hit me. Even the most prepared retirees, they aren't struggling with money. They're struggling with the sudden absence of identity, with structure and control. You know, during your working years, you had control over the big levers, folks. You could work more hours. You could take on a new project. You could negotiate. You could pivot if you had to. You could earn more if you needed to. In retirement, those levers, they just disappear. You go from active control to passive dependence. Dependence on stock markets, dependence on healthcare systems, dependence on fixed income, dependence on things you can't influence. And even if you're financially secure, your brain feels that loss of control. It's not the money that feels scary. It's the lack of levers. You know, you did everything right, but the rules of the game changed, and your brain is still trying to catch up. You know, we're stuck in the what-if loop. Your brain is built to solve problems. It's built to anticipate danger. It's built to scan for threats. That's how humans survived. But in retirement, the threats aren't obvious. They're vague. They're abstract. They're long-term. So your brain does what it always does. It just fills in the blanks. What if the market drops? What if healthcare costs just explode? What if something happens to one of us? What if I live longer than I expected? What if I don't live as long as I expected? These aren't financial questions, folks. They're big picture questions. And because they don't have clear answers, your brain keeps looping them over and over and over. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly. They're in the background, like a refrigerator hum you can't turn off. You know, for decades, life had a rhythm. Now we've lost the predictability. Paychecks came on a schedule, bills came on a schedule, weekends came on a schedule, vacations came on a schedule. Predictability equaled safety. But retirement's open space. And open space, it feels good until it feels uncertain. You know, when every day is flexible, your brain doesn't know what to anchor to. And when your brain can't anchor, it creates tension. Not because something is wrong, but because your internal compass is recalibrating. Here's the part most retirees, they never hear. Financial math and emotional math, they're not the same. Financial math says you have enough. You're stable. You're safe. Emotional math says, but this is the first time in life I'm spending without earning. This is the first time I'm relying on savings instead of replenishing them. This is the first time I'm watching numbers go down instead of up. You know, your brain interprets numbers going down as danger. Even if the plan's working perfectly, you're not doing anything wrong. Your brain is simply reacting to a pattern it's never seen before. The real reason retirement feels unsettling is your identity changed overnight. Your control levers, they disappeared. Your brain is wired for predictability. Your emotional math doesn't match your financial math. Folks, you're navigating a life stage with no roadmap. Again, you did everything right, but your brain is still adjusting to a world it's never lived in before. This isn't failure. This isn't a warning sign. This isn't a mistake. Folks, this is a transition, and transitions, they always feel unsettling, even the good ones. You know, if retirement feels a little shaky, a little uncertain, a little unfamiliar, it's because you're human. And you're in the middle of one of the biggest psychological shifts of your life. But here's the good news. You can build new structure. You can rebuild a sense of control. Shoot, you can create a life that feels grounded, meaningful, and even steady again. And it starts with understanding that nothing is wrong with you. You didn't miss anything. You didn't fail. You're just adjusting. Folks, if this touched a nerve with you, tell me in the comments what part of retirement feels the most unsettling for you right now. You know, your answer might help someone else feel less alone. And if you haven't subscribed to my channel, Retired Under Budget, you might want to real soon, because the next video coming up is what retirees stop buying and why they don't miss it. Folks, thanks for spending some of your time with me today. I'll see you in the next video. Y'all take care.